Hi all, my name is Ryan and welcome to my channel What the Pop, where we discuss pop culture in general and Buffy a lot. The usual spoiler alert, I may talk about things in these analyses that relate to future plot points, so if you haven't seen all of Buffy at least once, you have been warned. Come back once you've seen it all. Today we continue our look at Season 2 with my review and analysis of Episode 17, Passion. A plot summary. Angel is in full-on stalker mode and staring through Buffy's bedroom window like a common sex pest. He breaks in, touches her creepily, and draws her a pretty picture. Buffy tells Giles Angelus was in her room and they need a way to cancel his subscription to their houses. Jonathan and another student actually discover the school has a library. Buffy wants to tell her mum, Giles says absolutely not, and to ignore Angelus. Dumbest advice ever. Jenny gives Giles a book that will revoke Angelus's house privileges. Tells him that she loves him. Buffy tells Joyce about Angel. She's not happy about the age difference if she only knew the truth. Angelus has been at Willow's making arts and crafts out of her fish. Drew brings Spike a puppy called Sunshine to eat, gets a vision and a well-deserved headache. Jenny buys a new age paperweight that randomly glows. Buffy tells Jenny she doesn't want Giles to be lonely and he misses her. Buffy, Willow and Cordelia are de-angeling Willow's house when they find another Angelus original. Angelus meets Joyce, creeps her out, tells her that he can't stop thinking about Buffy since they shagged. Tries to follow her into the house, but Buffy and Willow have cancelled his membership. Giles finds Jenny working late on a special project. They make plans for later. Later, Angelus startles her, destroys the computer with the cure and the printout, then snaps her neck. Giles stops at Buffy's to get the spellbook, asks Willow if he should intervene on the sex talk on Buffy's behalf. No, Giles, you absolutely should not. Buffy and Joyce have the sex talk. It goes about as well as you'd expect. Giles arrives at his place to a romantic scenario, but it's all Angelus's doing. Jenny is dead. Giles tells Buffy and Willow they're devastated. They go to Giles's and all his good weapons are gone. Spike rightly says that Angelus is just going to piss off the Slayer. Molotov cocktails light up the factory, a crossbow hits Angelus and Giles uses the flames to set his bat on fire and proceeds to beat up Angelus with it. Just as Angelus gets the upper hand, Buffy enters the fray and kicks his butt. But she has to leave him to save Giles. Buffy drags him out, he yells, she punches, they hug and cry. At Jenny's grave, Buffy vows to kill Angelus for her. As Willow takes Jenny's class, the disc with Angel's cure slides off the desk and out of view. Okay, I have a lot to say about this episode, so buckle in. This episode is credited as being written by Ty King, who only has one other Buffy writing credit, the very average Some Assembly Required. Now, like Halloween was rumoured to have been rewritten by Marty Noxon and got her the story editor gig that season, this one clearly has also been rewritten, and I don't think it was by Marty, I think it was by Joss himself. It is well known that Joss was a script doctor in Hollywood, and this episode has Joss's fingerprints all over it. Why do I think that? This episode is one of the best episodes of the entire series. It's on my list of best Buffy episodes along with Becoming and Once More with Feeling. I think it's better than Innocence, I think it's better than Hush, and I think it's better than The Body. Now I say it all the time that Buffy is the best television series ever written. That makes this episode, to me, one of the best episodes of television I've ever seen. And one thing that all of those other episodes have in common is that they were all written by Joss. Now, given that this episode is brilliant and feels like it was written by Joss, and Ty King never wrote another episode, I believe that Ty King was let go and Joss substantially rewrote this episode. On that note, one of the writers at What Culture had this as the second most overrated episode of Buffy, the first being Once More with Feeling, and cited the dialogue between Jenny and Giles and Cordelia as being the reasons for why it shouldn't be so highly rated. The reason this episode is so highly rated is because, despite those flaws, this episode is still one of the best episodes of television ever. Now, while surprise and innocence were the episodes that made Buffy must-watch TV, passion was the episode that made us realise that this show can and will absolutely break our hearts. We've had moments before, Buffy saying, "I'm only 16, I don't want to die," in Prophecy Girl, for example. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. None of us knew what was in store for us. Having Angel go bad and break Buffy's heart was great from a storytelling perspective. But having Angelus then kill someone they loved and care about, and then use that murder in such a cruel and sadistic game with Buffy, by way of Giles, was horrific, and a stroke of genius from the writers. It was one thing when Angelus killed a quaint little shop girl off screen, and another when he turned Teresa and sent her as a vampogram. But to have him hunt and kill Jenny on screen in such a brutal fashion increased the stakes beyond anything we'd experienced before. As people say, shit got real. In my analysis of Young Royals, I said we increased the stakes to enhance the drama and the subsequent payoff from the eventual emotional release. And this episode does that perfectly. The season so far has been building to this, a steady increase in both the stakes the characters have faced and the sophistication of its storytelling. And this episode represents a momentary realisation of both the increased stakes and the catharsis in the emotional release. First though, let's look at some of the amazing scenes. This episode has some of my favourite scenes in it, not just from this season, but from all season. And it's not just the scenes as they are written, but the way they are shot. This comes down to Michael Gershman. Michael Gershman directed 10 episodes of Buffy between seasons 2 and 7. This episode actually being his first. But he was director of photography for the first 5 seasons of Buffy, so it's no surprise that he had a good eye when it comes to directing scenes. Michael passed away in 2018. Now, Jenny's death scene is a complete subversion of expectations, as the whole time we believe Buffy is going to show up and save her. The lead up to it was a constant ratcheting up of the tension, amplified by Christoph Beck's fantastic score. In the worst moment of the chase, when Jenny pushes a cart in front of him and he trips over it, in my headcanon, he did that on purpose, to give her a sense of hope that she might get away. I mean, he's a vampire with vampire speed and reflexes. And then suddenly, Angelus is in front of her and he just snaps her neck. It's so much worse than him biting her, because it lacks the sexual overtones with that ecstasy of orgasm, the little death that a vampire bite often alludes to in the victim. Here, he just brutally snaps her neck, yet he still manages to make it sexual, but solely about him, saying, "This is where you get off." And it's his pleasure in that moment. David Boreanaz looks like he's having an orgasm, which gives the one-sided pleasure a strong rape metaphor. The framing of the shot, the line delivery, Robbie Lamort's fear, and David Boreanaz's absolutely menacing pursuit, culminating in that visceral neck snape. It's just perfect. It's in an extremely menacing way, and it adds to the danger we feel later for Giles. And yet it's not even the best scene in this episode. It's not even the second best scene in this episode. When Giles fires Jenny may be one of the best scenes in all of Buffy and all of television ever. It is perfectly shot, from the framing to the tracking, the angles chosen, from his finding the rose at the door, right up to the moment of his realisation that she is dead. Even the moment after, once the cops are there. It has one of the most intelligently chosen music pieces to accompany any scene, O Suave Fanciulla, from Puccini's opera La Bohème. Even if you don't understand the Italian lyrics from the opera, you can feel romance in the lyrics between the characters Mimi and Rodolfo, of them falling in love, which is basically what the song is about. Now, their love is doomed, as we find out in the opera that Mimi is dying of consumption, which kills her in the end. So this song is a foreshadowing for Giles, and it builds to the climax of the aria just as Giles hits the top of the stairs and realises Jenny is dead. And the translation of what Mimi sings at that moment is, "Our love, you rule alone." And it's repeated when Giles is leaning against the wall as the cops remove Jenny's body. The repercussions of that scene are felt in another perfectly shot scene. Angelus is outside Buffy's house as we see Willow and Buffy inside. The phone rings and they receive the news about Jenny. We can't hear what is said, we don't need to hear it. The emotion in Sarah Michelle Gellar as she crumbles against the wall and slides down tells us everything we need to know. As does the raw anguish and muted cries through the window of Alison Hannigan and Christine Sutherland coming to find out what's wrong. We will see this technique used again in The Body with similar impact. Over the top of their grief, we have a part of Angelus's passion speech.
Passion is the source of our finest moments. The joy of love, the clarity of hatred, and the ecstasy of grief.
In this scene, it adds to the creepiness of Angelus, the sick joy he gets in their pain. This then leads into the second best scene in this episode, Giles going on a rampage of revenge, Buffy saving him, and this moment between them.
Why did you come here? This wasn't your fight.
Are you trying to get yourself killed? You can't leave me. I can't do this alone.
This cast never gets enough praise for how outstanding their acting is, so I will gush about them every chance I get. This scene is amazing. But this episode has so many other good scenes. Angelus playing the obsessed ex-boyfriend and waiting for Joyce and telling her that he and Buffy made love. The scenes with Spike, Angelus and Drew, the little exchanges between Jenny and Buffy and Jenny and Giles, and then there's this little gem of a scene.
Would you, so perhaps I should intervene on Buffy's behalf with her mother. Maybe say something?
Sure. Like, what would you say?
You will tell Buffy I drop by.
You bet.
A brief bit of levity in an emotionally heavy episode. There are only two things I really don't like in the episode. Xander's "I hated him long before you did," because his hate was based mostly in jealousy, not in Angel being a sociopathic killer, but it fits with Xander. And the Cordelia and her car joke, it got drawn out too long. It didn't really land and was just silly because there is no law around invites and cars. As an existentialist or absurdist, Joss Whedon believes that the meaning of life essentially boils down to the choices you make and the consequences of those choices. We talked about how action and consequences play a huge part in Joss's philosophy on life and is a major recurring theme throughout all 7 seasons of Buffy when discussing Season 2 episode Lie to Me. There it was all about someone else's choice, that the choices Ford had were all bad, but he still had choices to make. The consequences of those actions meant that he ended up a vampire, and Buffy had to stake him. We also discussed how, when put into a similar position, Buffy made the hero's choice, that she would face the Master, despite the prophecy saying she would die doing so. So far this season, the episodes have posed questions on life, love, sex, and morality, building us a picture of who Buffy is within those questions. In episode 3, School Hard, we got to see the similarities between Buffy and Spike as breakers of tradition, and how being that way made them successful. It evolved them beyond the norms of those traditions. We saw with Buffy particularly that it was the reason she lived. Despite dying as the prophecy predicted, she had this chosen family around her that was typically frowned upon by the Watchers Council, and that was the reason she was saved. In School Hard, we also saw how important sex and coupling would be to this season, and in this respect we get a number of parallels between Buffy and Spike again. Buffy is currently dealing with the issue of her partner having changed, having become this monster that she no longer recognises. Although it is not her fault, as she had no knowledge of the terms of his curse, it is a direct result of the choices she made. The emotional cost this had on her was evident in Innocence, when she crumbled to the ground, somewhat catatonic, a similar reaction she has to the news that Angelus has killed Jenny. Spike is dealing with a similar issue. Having come to Sunnydale for the revivification ritual to restore Drew to full strength, he is now wheelchair bound, injured with the scars to prove it, and dealing with Angelus mocking him incessantly and Drew being rather indifferent to his situation. The physical and emotional cost he is dealing with, watching Angelus effectively take Drew, and Drew loving the attention, is getting to him. Her general disregard for him, like bringing him a puppy called Sunshine, is every bit the mockery that Angelus's targeted barbs and actions are. It's really here that we see the stark contrast between Spike and other vampires. Spike is a vampire with some semblance of humanity at his core. We saw in Innocence that the judge felt it. But while Spike at full strength was a vicious, brutal killer, he truly cared for Drusilla, doted on her, and ensured she was taken care of. When the situation is now reversed, her treatment of him is far different, taking a cruel pleasure in his pain and suffering. We shouldn't expect anything less. We saw her delight in Angel's suffering when she tortured him before the ritual. So in this episode we have the consequences of Buffy and Spike's actions. Jenny is killed because Buffy has been unable to kill Angelus previously, because of the lingering feelings she has for Angel. Spike's resentment of Angelus is growing, but he is unable to do anything about it because he is still too weak. And it is the actions of Angelus and Drew that ultimately drive Buffy and Spike to action. Their actions will have consequences for them. For Buffy, this is her turning point. This is the episode that she resolves to kill Angelus and thus take responsibility for what her actions and inaction have caused. In a further parallel, it is Spike who realizes exactly what Angelus's actions will do.
I love a good slaughter as much as the next bloke. But his little pranks will only leave us with one incredibly brassed-off slayer.
And we can see that Spike is reaching a similar point, regretting his actions. That he regrets staying in Sunnydale and Angelus returning. We will see in a couple of episodes that Spike will be healed, and he will keep it to himself, not letting Drew or Angelus know that he is back to full strength. And this is solely a result of their actions, of how they've been treating him. So it's no surprise at all when in the season finale, though somewhat selfishly motivated, he betrays Angelus and helps Buffy, ensuring Giles stays alive. This episode gives us an interesting parallel between Giles and Xander in the last episode, Bewitched, Bothered and Bewildered. While the circumstances and outcomes are far different, when both Xander and Giles are wronged, they seek revenge rather than healing. In BB&B, when Cordelia breaks up with him on Valentine's Day, Xander is moping on his bed, listening to Patsy Cline, and is generally all sad and forlorn, the way people generally are when their significant other dumps them. Rather than allowing his feelings to run their course, Xander chooses to use magic and blackmails Amy into doing a spell for him. What's most interesting is how he chooses to use it. Rather than having Amy cast a spell on him to forget he ever loved Cordelia, or a spell just to heal his broken heart, he chooses revenge. He chooses to have Amy do a spell that will make Cordelia love him, so he can break up with her so she feels just as bad as he does. The obvious problem with this scenario is that it does nothing to fix how he's feeling. It just means that Cordelia will feel bad too. Of course, at the time, he didn't know that she already did feel as bad as he did. Now, given Xander's background, a child from an abusive home, his response really shouldn't be that much of a surprise. He has no displays of positive love and really only associates love with pain. So when he's hurt, it's understandable why he would choose to inflict pain rather than choose healing. And we've seen that kind of reaction from Xander previously, most notably when he asked Buffy out and she turned him down. Now, of course, being a victim of abuse is no excuse for being a douche canoe, it just gives an explanation for why he chooses these responses. In this episode, Giles is devastatingly wronged, orders of magnitude beyond what Xander experienced when Angelus killed Jenny. And not just kills her, he then uses her to set up a cruel scenario to get at Buffy through Giles. Although not entirely an innocent victim, given her knowledge of the curse and why she was there, Jenny had some foresight into this outcome, when she said that the curse and the whole situation with Buffy and Angel was just going to get people killed. First it was her uncle, and then her. So when Giles chooses revenge, it should come as no shock that Xander would support his decision, given his previous actions and his feelings towards Angel. But of course, revenge isn't that easy, as Buffy says.
You're right.
Thank you.
There's only one thing wrong with Giles' little revenge scenario.
And what's that?
It's gonna get him killed.
What's most interesting about Giles' revenge scenario is that he never expected to come out. He basically went on a suicide mission to cause Angelus pain. Like Xander, Giles didn't want to feel better, he just wanted Angelus to feel pain too, and a suicide mission could actually kill two birds with one stone, causing Angelus pain and ending his own. And we see evidence of this in the fight. He throws in the Molotov cocktail, sets his bat alight, and then starts hitting Angelus. But he clearly isn't going for the kill. He's not using a sword or axe to hack him up. He's just wailing on him with a baseball bat. A rather odd choice given that he emptied out his chest of good weapons. But an understandable choice for a suicide run. Although it was a theme already in episode 2, Some Assembly Required, with the introduction of Spike and Drew in School Hard, sex and coupling have been a theme throughout Season 2. It was Spike, our breaker of tradition and representation of passion and lust, that destroyed the Anointed One, a representation of the innocence of childhood that Buffy had left behind. Many of the episodes so far have warned of giving into passion, or warned of the consequences of passion. Both Inca Mummy Girl and Reptile Boy warned of giving into passion, that Buffy should remain the virginal sacrifice. A number of episodes had themes of choice, action, and consequences in general. But Bad Eggs spoke specifically on the consequences of passion, warning us that Buffy and Angel having sex would have specifically negative consequences. And Phases warned us of the need to control passion. What's interesting about passion so far this season is that our response to it and the way we act because of it is largely depicted as the measure of an adult, because adults aren't supposed to be slaves to passion the way teenagers are. This was particularly evident in Phases, where the more mature Oz was given an uncontrollable passion that, rather than deny or give into, he immediately sought to get under some semblance of control. In Oz's case, this was to isolate himself and chain himself up for those 3 nights. And we reminded on many occasions that despite carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, that Buffy is still a teenage girl with teenage hormones and teenage problems. Given this theme on passion in the season, it comes as a stark contrast that in this episode, titled Passion, that we are all, teenagers and adults alike, depicted as slaves to passion. As Angelus says,
It speaks to us, guides us. Passion rules us all, and we obey. What other choice do we have?
So what is the lesson for Buffy here? In Some Assembly Required, the message for Buffy was that the hand must be tempered by the heart. This was reinforced and contrasted in What's My Line Parts 1 and 2, with Kendra being a pure weapon, the monster that Buffy feared she was, or would become if she was just the Slayer and nothing else. Buffy taught Kendra that emotions were total assets, that they gave her fire and drive. But in this episode, we get this line from Giles.
But as the Slayer, you don't have the luxury of being a slave to your passions. You mustn't let Angel get to you, no matter how provocative his behavior may become.
Here we have Giles advising Buffy to keep her emotions in check, to ensure that she doesn't do anything rash. He advises her not to tell her mum that she's the Slayer, despite Angelus's history indicating that he will go after the family and friends of those he's obsessed with. Giles basically says, as Xander puts it, ignore him and hopefully he'll go away, which is a rather naive take on the situation given Angelus's history with obsession. And we will learn in the future, in Becoming Parts 1 and 2, that the obsession isn't a result of Angelus not having a soul. The obsession comes from Angel himself. We see the stalkery obsession that Angel develops over Buffy when he first sees her in LA, and she's the reason he comes to Sunnydale. And in Bewitched, Bothered and Bewildered, we were shown how easily passion can become obsession. But what all of this episode and the consequences of Buffy being unable to kill Angelus before sets up is Buffy learning a simple truth, that sometimes to kill a monster, one must become a monster. At the end of this episode, Buffy has finally come to that realization. Since Angel has changed, Buffy has been unable to kill Angelus. Her emotional investment in him has hindered her ability to carry out her duty as the Slayer. But we have a moment here in this episode where all of her aspects realize Angelus must die. Giles, her mind, is focused on inflicting pain, but he wants Angelus dead. And when the Scoobies discover him gone, Xander, her heart, says it's about time. Willow, her spirit, and Cordelia, her what-if version, are resigned to the fact that he's right. Earlier, Cordelia said what Buffy knows to be true, that Angelus could have just slit her throat at any time rather than messing with drawings and fish art. And because of this danger, now fully realised with Jenny's death, Buffy doesn't disagree with Xander, because she's already resolved to kill Angelus. This is important because it sets our protagonist and antagonist up for their final showdown. Buffy is finally going to embrace the nature of her calling that Kendra reminded her of. Buffy is the Slayer. It's not something that she can cast aside. It's something that is a part of her, something that defines her very existence. And I've already talked multiple times about how she has accepted that she is the Slayer, but she goes in and out of truly embracing that, of understanding it is part of who she is. We learn in the future that Slayer power comes from having a demon spirit infused in the Chosen, so it's not just a job. It's almost an inner drive and compulsion to slay, and we'll see evidence of that in future episodes too. She embraced that in Prophecy Girl and took down the Master easily. She embraced it in Halloween after experiencing what it was like to be helpless, to be a normal girl. And she kicked Spike's butt, who had previously bested her in School Hard. In When She Was Bad, Buffy posed the question to Angel, surely you've thought about if we fought, who would win? And so far the answer to that question is Buffy would win. She kicked his butt in innocence, despite holding back. She kicks his butt here. She's currently 2 for 2, yet Angelus seems to revel in the drama of it. Almost that his death would be just as welcome as hers, as long as there's drama to it. Given that Angelus is now a reflection of her dark heart, and the obsession that that brings, her reaction, her passion, is what he is obsessed with, and wants to use it to break her. While the lesson of some assembly required may have been to vet her actions through her heart, this episode makes Buffy realise that sometimes her love, conscience, and empathy has to be from the perspective of others. She has been unable to kill Angelus so far because of her love for Angel. But with Angelus having killed Jenny, her love, conscience, and empathy can no longer be about her love, her hopes, her desires for Angel. It now becomes about her love and empathy for those around her, for the people in her real and chosen family who are now in very real danger. And what that requires of Buffy is embracing the monster within, of becoming the cold, emotionless killer that is in her nature to be, of how Kendra appeared to be as a Slayer. She will have to embrace the Slayer, the pure Slayer, she alone, in order to kill Angelus, because she realises now that she can no longer afford for her emotions, her passion around Angel to cloud her judgment on what must be done. And it's a lesson Giles tried to teach her way back in episode 1, episode 4, Never Kill a Boy on the First Date, when he said, plunge, move on, plunge, move on. The emotionless Slayer, just doing the duty they are bound to. And the next real confrontation between Buffy and Angelus will be in the finale, as the episodes between now and then mostly avoid that confrontation taking place. In an interview with the BBC, Anthony Stewart Head said this is his favourite episode because it was a beautifully shot episode and a beautifully written one. And I think we can all agree on that. My favourite quote is this whole interaction, another bit of needed levity.
Hello. Excuse me, but have you ever heard of knocking?
We're supposed to get some books on Stalin.
Does this look like a Barnes & Noble?
This is a school library, Xander.
Since when?
Oh, yes, third row, historical biographies.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell. It helps the channel a lot. You can also support the channel through Patreon. If If you disagreed with anything I said, or have anything else to add, please put it in the comments below, and I'll see you next video.